America crosses the Iranian border on foot, and the first ground push rewrites every assumption about what comes next. Monday, 3:17 a.m., southwestern Iran, 14 kilometers north of the Iraqi frontier. The lead element of 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines crossed the berm in darkness, with night vision down and engines cold. 8 M1A2 SF-3 Abrams tanks at the front, 16 M2A4 Bradley fighting vehicles spread wide behind them. 2 companies of Marines on foot in the gaps. No lights, no radio transmissions above the minimum. The column moved through dust and flat nothing for 22 minutes before the first Iranian position marker appeared on the Blue Force tracker display. A Revolutionary Guard forward observation post. 4 personnel, dug in, watching the wrong direction. The JTAC riding in the lead, Bradley confirmed the coordinates and passed them to the FA-18, already orbiting at 18,000 feet, with a laser-guided GBU-12 under each wing. The post was gone before the column reached its position. The Marines crossed the 14-kilometer line at 3:39 a.m. without a shot fired from the ground. The first American ground push into Iran in history had begun quietly, in darkness, behind a bomb. The decision to put boots across the border had taken 11 days of argument at the highest levels of American military command. The naval and air campaign had run for 3 weeks before the ground option was authorized. Karg Island's oil infrastructure had been suppressed. Iranian air defense networks in the southwest had been degraded to 30% operational capacity by continuous CAD operations that flew 340 sorties in the first 12 days alone. The IRGCN fast attack boat threat in the Gulf had been broken in a single-night engagement, but the ballistic missile batteries in the Zagros foothills that had launched against American bases in Iraq were still active, had moved repeatedly after each near-miss strike, had proven more survivable than the targeting models predicted against aerial interdiction. Mobile launchers on mountain roads, moving every 90 minutes on strict schedules, dispersed into terrain that radar and optical systems at altitude couldn't fully penetrate, supported by a courier and logistics network that had been built to survive exactly the kind of campaign being run against it. The Joint Chiefs assessed that the only way to neutralize the remaining battery infrastructure was to put ground forces into position to fix the launchers, identify them precisely, and call fires on targets that couldn't be found from 30,000 feet. The Marines went in to solve a targeting problem that 3 weeks of air operations had been unable to close. The operational plan designated 3 axes. First axis, 2-7 Marines pushing north from the Iraqi border town of Ahvaz into Khuzestan province toward the road network feeding the Zagros approaches. Second axis, 3rd Battalion, 5th Special Forces Group moving northeast through the mountain passes 80 kilometers east, targeting IRGCN command nodes in the high ground. Third axis, 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment air assaulting by helicopter onto a logistics hub near Ahvaz that the intelligence picture identified as the primary resupply point for the ballistic missile batteries. 3 axes, 3 different problems, all of them required to succeed within a 6-hour window for the overall operation to achieve its objective before Iranian reserve forces could move to counterattack in numbers that changed the geometry. IRGCN Quds Force had been preparing Iranian defensive positions in Khuzestan for months, not for this specific operation, for the general contingency that American ground forces might eventually come across the Iraqi border. Fighting positions dug into elevated ground with interlocking fields of fire, pre-positioned RPG stockpiles cached in buildings and agricultural structures along every major road axis. Motorcycle courier networks established for communications in high EW environments where radios couldn't be trusted. Tunnel systems under key road intersections connecting fighting positions to covered withdrawal routes that satellite imagery couldn't trace. IED arrays pre-emplaced at choke points, bridges, narrow defiles, road junctions, with multiple trigger options including pressure plates, command detonation, and timer backup. The commanders in those positions were experienced men, had been through Syria, had been through Iraq, understood dispersal, concealment, and the specific tactical challenge of fighting a force with persistent aerial surveillance overhead and precision munitions that could reach any identified position within 90 seconds of being called. They were not going to stand in open ground and contest an Abrams tank column directly. They were going to make every kilometer of the advance cost time. They had built their entire defensive plan around making it cost time, because time was the one resource the 6-hour operational window couldn't afford to lose. What's your call? Type A if the ground push should fix objectives and hold for air power to finish the batteries. Type B if the Marines should push all the way to the battery positions, regardless of cost. Drop your answer below. The debate among commanders in the Operations Center was exactly this. The first real contact happened at 4:11 a.m. at a road junction 6 kilometers into Iranian territory. An IRGCN ambush, 11 fighters, 3 technical vehicles with DSK heavy machine guns, an RPG team on elevated ground 400 meters to the east. They let the lead Abrams pass through the kill zone and engage the second Bradley with 2 RPGs simultaneously. Both hit. The Bradley's armor stopped the penetrators. M2A4 Bradley armor stops RPG-7 and its common variants, but the blast knocked the crew around badly and temporarily disabled the primary weapon system. The Abrams that had passed through the kill zone reversed, elevated its main gun. The 120mm smoothbore fired a single M829A4 round at the elevated RPG position. The position ceased to exist. The DSHK vehicles were taken by the following Abrams in sequence over the next 90 seconds. Total engagement time, 4 minutes, 20 seconds. 1 Bradley with temporary systems damage. No Marine casualties. 11 IRGCN fighters in the kill zone when the ambush opened. None walking away from it. The column reformed and continued north. Subscribe to my channel right now. Hit the bell. Ground operations, naval engagements, air campaigns. Complete tactical breakdowns that other channels summarize in 30 seconds. This is the analysis this channel was built for. The ambush had been designed to slow, not stop. The IRGCN commanders understood that stopping an Abrams column in open terrain with light infantry and RPGs was not a realistic tactical objective. Slowing it was. Creating engagements that forced the column to halt, establish security, call in SAS, confirm the area was clear, and then move again. Each halt adding minutes, each confirmed, clear adding time. Time accumulating into the 6-hour window that the overall operation needed to close before Iranian reinforcements arrived. It was a reasonable attrition of time strategy. The Marines had anticipated it, had planned for it, were moving anyway. 3rd Special Forces Group reached their first objective, an IRGCN communications relay station on a ridge 1,400 meters above sea level, at 4:44 a.m., 8 operators. Silent entry. The station was defended by 6 guards. 4 guards were eliminated by suppressed fire before any alarm was raised. The remaining 2 were taken alive. The relay station servers were pulled and bagged for intelligence exploitation within 7 minutes of the first shot. The station was demolished with place charges at 4:58 a.m. The communications blackout for IRGCN command elements in the northeastern sector of the operational area was confirmed on American Signals Intelligence networks at 5:02 a.m. The Special Forces element was already moving to the second objective. Subscribe to NavyForceUSA right now. Hit the bell. Ground operations, naval engagements, air campaigns. Complete tactical breakdowns that other channels summarize in 30 seconds. This is the analysis this channel was built for. The Ranger air assault onto the Ahvaz logistics hub went in at 4:52 a.m. 16 MH-60mm Black Hawks from the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, 12 MH-47G Chinooks carrying the Ranger companies and their vehicles. The approach route had been designed to avoid every known Iranian radar and air defense position in the sector, threading a 40-kilometer corridor of reduced coverage identified by 11 days of SEAD operations and signals intelligence. The helicopters flew it at 80 feet above the ground, contour following, lights off in 2-minute spacing. The first Black Hawks crossed the objective perimeter at 4:52 a.m. The airfield guard force of 34 IRGCN soldiers had not been expecting a helicopter assault from the northwest. That corridor was supposed to be covered by a radar that the SEAD campaign had destroyed 6 days earlier. The assault landing was met with small arms fire from the perimeter guard towers. Both towers were taken by door gunners on the lead Black Hawks within 20 seconds of crossing the perimeter. The Ranger companies were on the ground and moving to their assigned objectives inside 3 minutes of the first helicopter touching down. The logistics hub had 4 priority targets. First, the ammunition storage bunkers supporting the ballistic battery resupply chain. Second, the vehicle maintenance facility servicing the mobile launcher transports. Third, the communications center coordinating battery movements. Fourth, a fuel depot providing the mobile launchers with the diesel they needed to move every 90 minutes. The Rangers secured all 4 targets within 19 minutes of landing. The demolition teams went to work. The ammunition bunkers took 14 minutes to prepare and detonate. The charges had to be placed to initiate sympathetic detonation across the entire stored inventory rather than just burning the surface layer. At 5:34 a.m., the primary bunker detonated. The secondary detonations ran for 6 minutes as stored ordnance cooked off in sequence. The fireball was visible to the lead Abrams of 27 Marines, 40 kilometers to the west, still pushing north through the Khuzestan flatlands. The Marines in those tanks knew what it meant. The resupply chain for the batteries they were hunting had just been severed. The second major contact for the Marine column hit at 5:18 a.m. at a bridge crossing over the Karun River. The bridge had been mined. Iranian engineers had placed 3 IED arrays in the road surface and 2 on the bridge structure itself, triggered by pressure plates. The lead mine detection vehicle, and Mo 1150 assault breacher vehicle running ahead of the column, detonated the first IED array on approach. The vehicle survived, took damage to its mine-clearing line charge system but kept moving. The breacher fired its remaining line charge across the bridge surface, detonating the remaining road arrays. 2 bridge structure charges remained. EOD team forward on foot confirmed the charges and cut them in 11 minutes. The column was halted for 23 minutes at the bridge crossing. 23 minutes of the 6-hour window gone to a bridge. The column commanders knew that every minute stationary was time for Iranian forces to close on the flanks and for reinforcing elements moving from Ahvaz to get closer. The bridge cleared. The column crossed. The push continued north toward the Zagros approaches, where the ballistic batteries were still moving. What would you do as the IRGCN ground commander watching an American armored column crossing the Karun River, knowing your reinforcements are still 90 minutes away? Comment your decision and your tactical reasoning below. The F-35B element operating from USS America amphibious assault ship in the Gulf had been providing continuous KAS coverage above the Marine column since before dawn. 4 aircraft in rotation, never fewer than 2 on station, each carrying GBU-53B Stormbreaker, small diameter bombs with multi-mode guidance, GPS, infrared, and millimeter wave radar in a single weapon the size of a large toolbox. The Stormbreaker's guidance suite allowed engagement of moving targets in dust, smoke, and poor visibility conditions that would have defeated older laser-guided munitions. When the IRGCN's primary QRF, a company of infantry and 18 trucks with 2 ZSU-23-4 anti-aircraft vehicles attached, moved down Highway 7 toward the Marine column's northern flank at 5:44 a.m., the F-35B overhead had them on its targeting system inside 90 seconds of their departure from the last covered position. The JTAC cleared the shot at 5:47 a.m. 4 Stormbreaker bombs released from altitude, each independently guided to a separate target in the convoy. 4 trucks destroyed in the first pass. The ZSU-23-4 vehicles, recognizing the targeting pattern, attempted to disperse off the road. The second pass caught one of them in open terrain. The convoy's surviving vehicles turned back toward Ahvaz. The QRF that was 90 minutes away became irrelevant before it covered 30% of the distance. By 6:30 a.m., the tactical picture had simplified in the Marines' favor. The logistics hub at Ahvaz was destroyed. The IRGCN command relay station in the mountains was gone. The ballistic battery resupply chain was severed. The QRF that should have been closing on the Marine column's flank had been turned back by air power before it reached effective range. The 3 Marine axes were within their planned timelines. Not ahead. The bridge crossing had cost time. The ambushes had cost time. The terrain itself had cost time in ways that every ground operation costs and plans for, but within the operational window, within the 6 hours that the plan required. The first ballistic missile battery was fixed at 6:47 a.m. A third Special Forces team working from high ground with a SOFLAM designator identified a FATA 110 battery in a valley north of Masjid Suleiman. 3 transporter erector launchers, a radar vehicle, and a command post in a cluster of farm buildings that had been used as cover for 3 days. The battery was stationary, had been stationary for longer than its 90-minute movement cycle should have allowed. The resupply failure had disrupted the cycle. Without fuel deliveries, the launchers couldn't move on schedule. Without moving on schedule, they became fixed targets. The same vulnerability that air power had struggled to create for 11 days had been produced in 3 hours by cutting the supply chain on the ground. The SOFLAM designation went active at 6:49 a.m. The GBU-28 bunker buster released from an F-15E at 38,000 feet reached the target in 48 seconds. All 3 launchers were destroyed. The radar vehicle was destroyed. The command post took a direct hit from the second bomb. The battery that had launched against American positions in Iraq 3 times in the previous week was gone. Don't miss the follow-up on how the second and third batteries were fixed and destroyed. Subscribe to NavyForceUSA and hit the bell. This operation is still running, and every phase matters. 2 more batteries were destroyed by 9 a.m. using the same combination. Special Forces teams in the high ground with laser designators, supply disruption forcing the batteries to hold position, air power executing the terminal strike once the target was fixed and confirmed. The method was not elegant, was not the surgical air campaign that the first 11 days had attempted, was a slower, dirtier process of ground teams working through terrain at personal risk to create the targeting conditions that aircraft alone couldn't produce. But it was working. 3 batteries destroyed in a single morning that had survived 11 days of aerial interdiction. The operational logic of the ground push had proven itself in the only way operational logic can be proven, in execution, under fire, against an opponent that was doing everything it could to prevent exactly this outcome. The Marine column reached its final objective line, a ridge system with direct observation of the 3 northern approach routes used by IRGCN logistics in the Zagros foothills. At 9:44 a.m., 6 hours and 27 minutes after crossing the border berm in darkness, 27 minutes over the planned window, 2 Bradleys with battle damage, 1 Marine with a shrapnel wound to the forearm treated and returned to duty, 6 IRGCN ambush positions encountered and destroyed. 1 bridge delayed the column 23 minutes. The objective line was held. The Special Forces teams were still in the high ground, still designating targets, still working the batteries that hadn't been found yet. The Rangers were still on the Ahvaz airfield, consolidating intelligence materials and waiting for extraction. The operation was not finished, was running exactly as the plan required it to run, at exactly the pace that the terrain and the enemy permitted. Was this ground push the right call, or did the 11 days of air campaign not go far enough before boots crossed the border? Type G for ground was necessary. Type A for air needed more time. Make your case in the comments below. There is a kind of warfare that only ground forces can conduct. Not because air power is insufficient. The air campaign had done what air campaigns can do, had degraded and suppressed and destroyed everything that could be found from altitude. Because some problems require a human being to walk into the terrain, fix a position with their own eyes, and hold the laser on the target long enough for the bomb to find it. The Zagros foothills had hidden 3 ballistic batteries from 11 days of aerial surveillance because the terrain allowed concealment that altitude couldn't penetrate. The Marines and Special Forces operators who crossed the border at 3:17 a.m. went in to do what only they could do. By 9:44 a.m., the answer to the question of whether it was necessary was written in 3 destroyed battery positions and a resupply chain that would not be rebuilt quickly. To every military command watching the progression of this operation from the first airstrike to the morning of the ground push, what changed in 6 hours of ground operations was not firepower. America had firepower from the first night. What changed was targeting. The ability to fix a mobile threat in complex terrain is not a technology problem that aircraft alone can solve. It is a presence problem. It is solved by putting people into the ground and the high terrain who can see what satellites and aircraft cannot see, hold what needs to be held until the strike arrives, and confirm the result in person before moving to the next target. That combination, ground presence, providing the targeting data that enables air power to finish, is not a doctrine from a previous era. It is the doctrine that worked on Monday morning at the edge of the Zagros foothills in 6 hours against a threat that had survived 11 days without it. If this level of operational analysis is why you're here, like this video, share it, and subscribe to NavyForceUSA. Ground operations, naval engagements, air campaigns, we cover the full spectrum at the depth that matters. What does Iran do differently if the ground push had been authorized on day 1 instead of day 11? And which element of this operation, the Marines, the Rangers, or the Special Forces teams in the high ground, do you think was most decisive to the outcome? Drop both answers below. The best analysis drives our next breakdown.